So this is what is called antique crackle, where you can see that you have an image which has been stuck using decoupage techniques onto a painted surface, and then the crackle itself goes over the top of the painted image so that you can still see the image underneath it. You can see that there are large cracks and small cracks, but this doesn't cover the image at all. In contrast to actually using something like a paint crackle, where you actually crack one color paint on top of the other. So you can see here that the base coat itself was black, and on top we've crackled with the white. There are videos on my channel describing this, and there are two different techniques. This is done using a crackle medium, and this one is doing crackle using glue. So you can see that the effect of this is actually quite different to the one that I'm going to be showing you today. The one that I'm showing you today is using crackle over a picture to give it an antique look, whereas the one where we're cracking paint on paint gives you a much more weathered effect. So stick with me. We are going to do this step by step so that you get a clear understanding of it. Okay, so let's now discuss how we do the antique crackle, where we are putting a crack over a picture that has been stuck down. So normally you would use this in an instance where you've done maybe some decoupage onto a surface and you would like to make it look more vintagey and use this crackle, but you still need to see the picture. That's what I'm trying to say. So I've just simply taken some pieces of wrapping paper and stuck it down. And the way this crackle works is that you actually have to do 3 different steps. First, you put on a transfer glaze, which dries quite quickly. Okay. Then you put on your crackle glaze, which is a slow drying medium. So you would normally need that overnight to dry. And then you would color your cracks using either a gilding paste, or you could use an oil paint, or you could use something like shoe polish, anything that has a solvent base as a medium, because the crackle medium, which is this here, is actually very sensitive to moisture, so you can't use your acrylics and things like that, so it must be an oil-based paint. So the first I'm going to show you is how to apply the transfer glaze onto your surface, and I'd just like to show you what it looks like when it's dry, that it actually does look somewhat streaky. Oh gosh, I hope it's picking up on the camera. Somewhat streaky, but you'll also find that the transfer glaze, when it dries, is slightly sticky to the touch, and that is normal, so don't be concerned about that. If you're wanting to get very, very fine cracks, then you're going to just simply spread this on very, very thinly. But if you're wanting to get thicker cracks, you need to spread it more thickly. And I have taught decoupage to hundreds of students literally over many, many years. And by far the most effective way of applying it is actually with your finger. Sorry if you don't like to have your fingers dirty, you could use a brush, but the problem with a brush is that as you work with a brush, you tend to put pressure on it, and so often you're dragging off as much as you're putting on. This way you can have a little bit more control as to how thick or how thin you want to put it on. One of the ways to check whether you've actually got this covered all over the surface is to just tilt it to the light so you can see whether it's thick or whether it's thin. And then if you just set it aside and leave it, you'll find that this will actually level itself out quite nicely. You normally, in a hot sort of summer's day, would perhaps need to leave this for about half an hour or so. But in winter, definitely I would leave it maybe for an hour or so just to check. Make sure that if you're having something that has edges like the coaster, which this could be, that you just clean up any bits that might have dribbled down the sides. So this we're going to set aside now, so leave that to dry. And that was done with a transfer glaze. This second coaster that I have here has already got transfer glaze on, and this has dried already. So what I'm going to do now is show you how to put the crackle on. And yes, we are going to be using our fingers once again. So I'm going to put a squirt of this on, and just simply spread this out. This does have a resin in it and it's going to self-level, so you don't need to worry about it, but you do need to make sure that you get right up to the edges, because with the crackle, if you don't get it really up to the end points, you will actually notice the difference once you've colored your cracks, and it doesn't look very pretty. So make sure that you get right to the edges all the way around. Once again, like the transfer glaze, if you put this on very, very thinly, you're going to get very, very fine, delicate cracks. And if you put it on slightly thicker, you will get larger cracks. But you do need to have the same with your transfer glaze underneath. So for fine cracks, you put a thin layer of transfer glaze and a thin layer of crackle. And for larger cracks, a thick layer of transfer glaze and a thicker layer of crackle. So when I was teaching my students decoupage, what I used to do with them was just to take the back of a cereal box, and we used to just paint it, maybe stick 1 or 2 pictures on, and then just do a test sheet starting at the top. And you can even write down what you've done right at the top. Do fine or thin layers of transfer glaze to thicker, and then when you've let that dry, put thin layer of crackle to thicker. And that gives you a very good idea of how thickly to apply the medium for the effect that you want to get. We're all different, and it is important that you actually get this the way that you want it. So you can see at this particular point that this looks really gross. It's all uneven and what have you. But as I said, don't worry, it's going to self-level, and I'm just going to set that one aside and leave that to dry. Remember, the crackle is going to take about 24 hours to dry. So now the next step is to color the cracks. So I've got here some gilding paste, which I'm going to use to color. This is gold. You get this in a whole lot of different colors. But as I mentioned before, you could use some oil paint, or you could actually use something like shoe polish. When I'm talking about shoe polish, I'm talking about the cakes of shoe polish, good old-fashioned stuff that you have to clean with a brush, not this liquid stuff that you apply. And you'll see that as I've got this gilding paste on my little piece of paper towel, that I'm just rubbing it in circular motions. Don't be distressed that this actually looks a bit of a mess at the moment, because it is actually fairly easy to clean, but you're needing to actually now fill these little cracks that you've made. And so when you look at this section here, you can't really see the cracks, but as I'm starting to apply the color, you can notice that the cracks are starting to show up because I'm filling them with this color itself. This is a solvent-based gilding medium. So if I wanted to clean up some of this excess, my first bit that I'm going to do is just going to be to wipe off any excess. And if you were really unhappy with the amount that you've got on, you can put a drop on a piece of paper towel. And it does need to be something that's very absorbent, not a sponge. And then you just wipe off the excess. So now I'm going to just show you what I've got here is that all these little cracks are now being highlighted because they've been colored in. I hope you can see that nicely, the crackle. And I'm now just going to take the clean section of this paper towel and just start to rub this so that I'm picking up the excess of this gilding paste. Okay, so you can start to see now quite clearly where the actual cracks are and how they've been colored. You will find that often these things will exaggerate a little bit more in time, but that's okay, because once you've colored them, you've actually got a good idea of the effect that you're going to get. So I could carry on with this further and now just take a little drop of turbs if I wanted to clean some of this up, or I could leave it. If this is going to be on a surface like a tray or a placemat or maybe a tabletop where you are actually going to need to be able to wipe it down quite a lot, it's a really good idea to be able to say, put a varnish on, but be careful. Because I mentioned to you that the crackle glaze is very, very sensitive to moisture, you're going to need to put on an oil-based varnish or a resin. So you can get a 2-part resin that you can mix, which is like the tray with the roses on that I showed you previously. Or you could put on something like an exterior household varnish, or something even like a yacht varnish. The yacht varnishes are quite nice if you want a really antique-y look because they go slightly yellow in time. But it's no good putting a water-based varnish over this because the crackle is just going to dissolve and you're going to find that you end up with a big mess. So I hope that this has given you some insight into how this crackle process works. Just remember that there are 3 steps. First one is your transfer glaze, and leave that to dry for about half an hour. Then your crackle medium, and that will self-level, and it's going to need to dry for 24 hours. Then you're going to be coloring your cracks with your gilding paste, oil colors, or shoe polish, and then finally varnish it. If you didn't want to varnish it at all, and it was just something that needed a protective covering, I find that the clear floor polish that we used to use on stoops here or verandas, the cement verandas that were often painted, it just came in a big tin, and you used to just take this clear polish and wipe the floors with it. That works very nicely on a surface like that because it will give it some protection. So I hope that's helpful, and if you'd like to see how to do the other crackle that we've done, the one where we cracked paint colors on top of each other using either crackle medium, which is a different one to the crackle glaze, or you could use the glue method, please just look at the links that I've put below to those videos and you can check them out. I've also done a comparison between them so that you can see one versus the other, how long they take to dry, how effective they were, the different kinds of effects. So if you're doing a big project, that might be worthwhile looking at. Anyway, there's plenty for you to look at in these videos. And if you've enjoyed this, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel so that you actually get all the latest videos. And please, I'd love to hear from you. So the comment section is below, and I will see you soon. Bye for now.